This is CW Infosec, and today we have a special guest. We have the author of Recon, creator of the Windows and Linux privilege escalation for OSCP and beyond courses on Udemy. He also has 2 rooms on tryhackme.com, Windows Prives and Linux Prives. He is a teacher, a student, a leader, and a follower. You may recognize him by his chiseled, statue-like face, Tib3rius. Good afternoon, Tib3rius.
Good afternoon.
For those that go ahead.
I was going to say that was a good introduction.
Yeah, I've been looking at a lot of different interviews. I feel like the Jocko podcast does the guest introduction very well, so I figured I'd do a little bit of an homage to him. But for those that may not have heard of you, what's the life of Tib3rius like? Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, so you can probably tell by my accent, but I'm originally from the UK. I've lived in America for, I think, almost 6 years now. I've been a Pentester for about 8 years, I think. Most of it's been focused on web apps, so that's kind of my forte. And yeah, even though I've been a Pentester for 8 years, I only got OSCP certified last year. So it was kind of like a weird ride. And that's how basically I found you guys through the Infosec Prep Discord server. And like you said in your introduction, yeah, as a result of me taking the OSCP, and doing enumeration and finding the manual stuff really boring, I wrote Recon, which, I know a lot of people now use, which is nice. And yeah, that's pretty much me.
And by the way, if any of the listeners have never tried using Recon, that is incredible. Just as an aside, how long did it take you to program that?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. So, it came about because I used Reconnoitra. I think that's how you pronounce it. I have no idea. And I think it was called BScan. And I liked both, but I think although Recon was kind of got a combination of the two. So a lot of the code I just sort of lifted from those tools and sort of merged it together. So I think I coded it in like the last month of my labs. And then obviously after that, I perfected it for the exam. I say perfected it. I actually don't think to be honest, the code is that good, which is why, I'm planning a rewrite at some point. But yeah, so I'm probably a month or so on and off,
Yeah, well, it's certainly much better put together than a lot of my projects where I just slap stuff together from Stack Exchange, but I'm sure a lot of people do that. So, what do you currently do? And, just to kind of build up on that, was there any event in your life or any particular thing that really sparked your interest in this field?
Yeah, so I mostly do web app pen testing right now. I'll occasionally do other things like mobile, external, internal, but I'd say it's like 95% web app. As to like what got me interested in the field, I was doing a computer science degree, and the first year was basically just pure computer science, and we were given the opportunity to sort of change and minor in something for the years 2 and 3. And one of my friends actually suggested I come along to the information security sort of lecture, just to see what it was all about. And I think at the time that was probably the first time I'd sort of got interested in information security. So there weren't, but bearing in mind this is back in, oh god, when was it, 2010, I think, or maybe 2009. So there weren't many degrees in information security at the time, at least not dedicated ones. So I think that was what convinced me to do it, just because it seemed like such a niche subject.
What's a normal day like for you on the job?
That depends on the day. So, like, obviously, most of my time is spent testing. We the company I work for works remote, so we basically have individual tests. So there's not really any teamwork involved. I'm mostly left to my own devices because they trust me that I know what I'm doing. So a standard day will be mostly spent testing. There'll be the occasional meeting, internal meetings, and then sometimes with customers as well. If I'm nearing the end of a test, I'll probably devote more time to actually writing the report. I try my best to write things up as I find them, but as usual, it's more of a sort of mad dash near the end to get everything together. And then one thing that our company does is we usually, if the customer wants it, we'll get them on a call and go through the report just to make sure they understand everything and if they have any questions about something. But other than that, if I do have any spare time, which to be honest is rare, especially these days, I'll try and catch up on infosec news, especially if it relates to web apps or some new vulnerability.
Yep, so if you were ever wondering what it's like to actually work in pen testing, prepare to be thrown to the wolves.
Yes.
So occasionally you'll hear crazy stories about people breaking into like ultra top secret facilities. Are there any successful pen test stories that you're able to share with us?
Yeah, with web apps, there's like so much you could count as a success. Obviously, getting an SQL injection is still a success. The best findings, though, are clearly when you get command execution, simply because it's like so rare and it's almost like the holy grail of web app testing. I think, though, that there's a number of ways you can get command execution these days. It's ironically not like 10 years ago where it was just command injection, but these days you can get it through deserialization, for instance. I think probably the best example of it, and I think I've alluded to this a few times when I was streaming. And honestly, I still feel like this is probably the best hack I've ever done. So it was an ASP server, not ASPX, so it's kind of cheating, right? It was an SQL injection that was what I term super blind, which means so a blind SQL injection, still gives you some indication that something's happening, whether it's changing the content on the page or like performing a sleep, right? A super blind is completely separate. You can't sleep anything. There's no visual change on the page at all. What you can do, and what you usually will do, is trigger a DNS request back to a server that you control. In this case, Burp Collaborator, which, by the way, if you haven't used Burp Collaborator, it's epic. So I found an SQL injection, which I think used XP_Tib3rius, which is effectively a way of just connecting to a share. And I got it to do a DNS lookup. And obviously the next stage is, okay, well, if XP_Tib3rius is available, then maybe XP_command shell is available, which it was. Again, ASP. Ooh. So an old server anyway. And from there, it was like, okay, well, this is still blind, right? So I could sleep the server via XP_command shell. So I could turn the super blind into more of a blind remote command execution. However, getting the results of any command that I executed was practically, impossible. It's completely blind. I guess you could do it by making a sleep statement, for every single, letter of the output, which would, take forever. The other problem was I tried obviously getting a reverse shell and there was nothing coming back on any port. So this was clearly a lockdown server in terms of, actually getting out on any ports. It was firewalled off, which begs the question, how did the DNS work in the first place? And the reason the DNS query worked is Burp Collaborator is set up to be an authoritative domain server. So any domain lookup for a subdomain of the Burp Collaborator server is guaranteed to hit the Burp Collaborator server itself. So basically what was happening was when I used XP_Dirtry to try and connect to a share, it wasn't connecting to the Burp Collaborator server. It was asking its local DNS server, so in this case probably an Active Directory domain controller, where the Burp Collaborator server was listed, and obviously the DC doesn't know where it is, so it goes off and tries to find it on the internet, and eventually the DNS query reaches the Burp Collaborator server. So what I eventually do, to cut a rather long story short, I figured out that PowerShell was available on this box, and I scripted a PowerShell script which effectively executed a command, converted to hex, and then sent a number of DNS queries where the subdomain was like the broken up output. So I think I did 32 character subdomains encoded as hex, which I received on the Burp Collaborator server and then decoded to get the output of the command. So if it sounds complicated, it is. It was like a good few hours just to get anything off the server. But ultimately, I was able to get complete command execution. It was running a system as well, which is like the cherry on top. So I think honestly that was probably the most successful exploit I've ever done.
That is absolutely wild, and a lot of situations in pen testing, it's trying to find ways from point A to point B, but this sounds like you had to go through some transdimensional portal to come back from Z and then get to B. Right. That's wild.
Yeah, I've said it quite often, but a lot of pen testing, especially with web apps, is just about puzzle solving. If you love puzzle solving, you'll probably make a good pen tester.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, were there any failures that really stood out to you as big learning experiences?
No, I don't make mistakes.
That's a strong flex.
Yeah. So one piece of advice. So I mean, it's harder to do now, but when Burp used to have Spider, one word of advice: one piece of advice: don't ever run Spider as an authenticated user, unless you have another account. Also, never ever do it if you're authenticated as an admin. So to give an example of why, I was once asked to pen test a WordPress site, which is already weird, and we logged in, and I clicked the turn on Spider, and a few minutes later they sort of run over to me and it's like the site's gone. It's like, what? Like it's like no. the server's crashed. It's like no, the blog has disappeared. And it turns out, bear in mind this was several years ago, so I'm not sure how well it happens now, but if you Spider on WordPress, it will just go through every post and just click delete. and all the contents and all the users and everything. So yeah, that was a learning experience. Luckily, it was in their staging environment and they had backups. So I was a junior at that point. I don't remember getting a massive telling off. I think it annoyed the customer more than anything. But it was definitely a learning experience. I don't think I ever enabled Spider ever again after that. I was just like, what? I'm just going to do it manually, or at least I'm going to do a Spider while I'm unauthenticated. So that was probably honestly the worst thing I've ever done, because it effectively took down their entire blog and they had to, revert from a backup. So yeah.
Well, on the bright side, it wasn't a bad guy that did it.
Yeah, exactly. So at least that's that.
So, looking back on your life, did you have a different career plan when you were younger or getting out of university? or
Yeah.
even before you got into university?
Right. So, like during my teenage, it's weird, and I really don't understand why. But so my teenage years, I was doing a lot of web dev, making small web applications using, unfortunately, PHP. But back then that was pretty normal. For some reason, and like I say, I'm not entirely sure why I was going this path, but I was going to major in English at university. So I originally applied to university to do English. Luckily, though, I got rejected. So that was actually kind of good, because if I'd been accepted, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. But I took a gap year instead and sort of rethought my approach and was like, well, I did math as like what we call an A level. So it's like years 16 to 18 in high school, or whatever beyond that is in American. And so I did math, and that managed to get me on a computer science degree. But yeah, I could have effectively been an English major if I hadn't completely failed English.
My apologies. So, on that note, what was your career path like for getting to where you are now? As an example, like the first couple of jobs until you got to where you are currently.
Yeah, so I mean, my career path is weird. It's almost like failing upwards. So I did my bachelor's was in computer science, and then obviously I minored in information security. After that, I did a master's in information security, and then I sort of my first job was actually doing security research. So I kind of out the gate somehow landed a security research position. I'm still not entirely sure how, but it was for an auditing product, so we would be writing checks for that. And then after 6 months, I was like a 6-month probationary period, and I did great. But the company basically turned around after 6 months and said, "You're doing well, but we're not in a good financial situation right now, so we'd like to put you on a monthly rolling contract." And I was like, okay, all smiles. And then I got home and started applying for pen test positions, because I thought, I've been a security researcher for 6 months. I think the next step is pen tester. But I went for a couple of interviews, completely failed them, and then eventually got a job in London. Probably just because the guy who was interviewing is like one of the nicest people. I'm still friends with him, even though he hasn't been my boss for like 5 years now. But I got a lot of respect for the guy, because he clearly saw that I was passionate about this, and even though I didn't have really any skills as a junior pen tester, he brought me on, and I pretty much just taught myself, by going on site with the senior guys and learning from them, and obviously going home and studying this stuff. So that's like from there. Once you got your foot in the door and you're a junior pen tester, you can like just work your way up. So that was kind of the path. I probably wouldn't recommend it nowadays, because obviously one of the problems with it was I didn't have any IT or sysadmin experience. So it was just like I was thrown in at the deep end. Really, well, I threw myself in at the deep end.
And on the bright side, you had a wonderful supervisor to go along with that. And I mean, for me personally, there was a friend of mine when I was stationed in Okinawa that completely turned my life around. So, keep in mind, for those of you listening, when you're going through job interviews, building and maintaining strong relationships is going to be a big aspect of your career success.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Were there any challenges along the way?
Yeah, so obviously the lack of IT and sysadmin experience was a massive challenge at first. But I managed to learn on the job, a lot of self-study. I think, honestly, that's why, though, I've moved myself towards web apps, just because I'd done the web development. and I had a background knowledge in it. So I wasn't able to look at a web app and go, well, I have no idea how this works. I could sort of visualize it because I'd been developing web apps in my youth, so I could understand it a bit more. And then approaching that and seeing how vulnerabilities work was a lot more intuitive. So I think the main even though I'd been a pen tester for I think 6 or 7 years by the time I took it, it was still kind of a challenge because I'd been doing web apps, web app pen testing, and OSCP is more sort of network focused, or at least. So it was still kind of difficult.
What do you think was one or a handful of things that really helped you overcome those challenges?
You still there?
Yes, can you hear me? Hello? Mic check. Can you hear me now? Hello?
Are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Let me just double check. It's not my end.
Yes, hello?
No. I got sound still, but I just can't hear you. Okay.
Hello? Can you hear me now? Mic check. Mic check. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear
Can
me?
you hear me?
Have I returned? Hello?
I still can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I can see you. I just tried, disconnecting my headphones. Let me try switching to another pair. Hang on.
How about now?
Can you say something?
Yes, can you hear me?
No. Yeah, I have the sound, like I can hear Discord notifications coming through, but when I see you talking with the green, but at least I assume that's what it is. It seems stuck on green.
Oh boy. Maybe.
Shoot. Let me try. I'll try restarting my Discord as well.
Hello.
There we go. I can hear you now.
All right. We good to go?
Yes.
I'm not sure what happened there, but it's not a big deal. We can always edit that out afterward.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so we just covered the career path and how you overcame those challenges. Let me sure I mark down what time to return. So we will return in roughly 10 seconds. So, with education being a very large part of your experience, do you have any thoughts on, the degree path versus the certification path?
Yeah, so that's kind of a complicated issue these days because there's more infosec specific degrees now, which I think is great. But at the same time, there's so much content online that's either free or you can get for a small fee. That I expect maybe we'll see a shift away from degrees. Added to that, anyone can really get into bug bounties these days and have some success. So you've got the experience factor coming in as well. I think if you add a few relatively cheap certifications, you might be able to convince a hiring manager that you know your stuff. Certainly, I think right now, if you're going for a job in InfoSec, having a degree that's at least related looks good. I'm not sure how sort of advantageous it is compared to sort of having that bug bounty experience or maybe a few certs. So really, it's a toss-up.
Absolutely. And then there might be a lot of people out there that might find themselves in a similar situation like myself, where, you have a fair amount of experience and you're considering education. Do you have any thoughts on, computer science degrees versus computer engineering degrees versus computer security degrees, and which do you think are most beneficial for a career in InfoSec in general?
Yeah. So obviously, speaking as a computer science major, I think I know more than I need to about compiler theory for my job. So I honestly, if you can get a degree that's more in tune with where your passions lie, definitely do it. However, there's obviously some things about a computer science degree you can directly apply to InfoSec. So it's not like if that's the only thing available to you, you shouldn't do it. I think definitely if there's no universities that you can get into what I should say, if they're the only universities you can get into have computer science degrees, then definitely that's still a good option. But I think these days, especially where information security is such a broad subject now, and honestly, it's kind of now removed from computer science where it used to be a subset. I think going for a computer security or information security degree is probably your best bet.
And it's interesting that you say that, because I've often heard the opposite in recent times, where people will advocate going for a more generalized computer science degree versus a specific computer security degree. And that's mostly in relation to if you ever end up deciding you might want to change careers after being in InfoSec into another IT related field. There's some people that say having one sort of specialized degree might pigeonhole you into just computer security jobs.
Yeah, I can understand that perspective. I think though, if you have a good amount of passion for information security, then I would find that rare. I mean, I've been in this industry, probably I think 10 years now, and I have no intention of switching back or switching to a more generic or not even anything to do with security. So, but even so, I think experience counts for a lot. So, we'll see.
I totally agree with that. Now, on the flip side, for those that are, more in like the cost effective mindset, maybe they want to pursue certifications over a degree or instead of a degree. Which certifications do you think are critical in the job market at beginner, intermediate, and senior levels?
For beginner, if we're talking pen testing, then obviously OSCP is still a must-have. Even if it's just to get your CV noticed or brought to the top of the pile. And that's just because of the name recognition, right? Like a lot of hiring managers know what OSCP is. I don't have much respect for OSWE, which is the web app one. It is a code review cert. And I mean, personally, code review to me is really boring. It's also more and more automated. So I worry that you'll have this really nice code review certificate, but all the code review jobs are just going automated. So that I wouldn't recommend, at least not right now for a beginner. Maybe if you're an intermediate or going more advanced, it could be. Certainly, if you want to be a pen tester, then OSCE and OSEE are practically useless, right? They're great if you want to do exploit dev or security research, but really there's no need for them as a pen tester. And I think more people probably need to understand that. Now, for intermediate and senior levels, honestly, it'll really depend again. But I think you need to look at these certs that are sort of covering a very specific subject within Infosec. So eLearn and Pentester Academy have some really decent courses. And the more you know about a specific subject, the better equipped you'll be to actually advance in your career. There are literally no senior people who have a broad knowledge of Infosec. They just don't exist, right? They all specialize in something and they focus on that. You can't know everything. The subject is so big that it's just impossible.
Yep, and then there's also the employer-backed route where you get into certifications like SANS. There are options in those higher tier positions, but you may find money is a factor in pursuing those.
Right. Yeah. Never pay for SANS out of your pocket. Get your company to do it for you. They're just. I mean, I've heard good things about the SANS courses, but yeah, it's just not practical for anyone to pay for it, themselves.
So on that note, there might be a lot of people out there that are wondering, what level of expertise that they're at currently. Do you have like any ideas or any way that you feel would be beneficial for someone to gauge where they're at knowledge-wise? Because sometimes people get caught in the imposter syndrome trap.
Yeah, no, that is a tricky one because this industry in particular is absolutely fraught with imposter syndrome. You only have to follow, a few people on the Infosec Twitter community to know that. Myself, I'll go for like weeks without any critical findings in web apps, and still some self-doubt will creep in, and I'll think, what am I doing? I'm just, not a good pen tester. But then you'll have a really great test and you'll find almost all of the OWASP top 10 and you'll get your confidence right back. So I'm not entirely sure there is a way of avoiding it, but I think your best bet is taking challenges. So sites like TryHackMe, they have some great advanced content. If you can work through, even if it's like a walkthrough, right? If you walk through or do the challenges and you find yourself understanding and predicting what's going to come next, then you're probably more knowledgeable than you think. But if you constantly find yourself getting stuck or you come across topics that you have absolutely no idea on, then you need to focus and go and learn some more stuff. I think honestly that's probably the best way, just self-testing.
Yes, absolutely. And, I'm currently in a senior role, but, I find the kind of walkthrough-ish mantra of tryhackme.com to be awesome as an alternative resource. And speaking of alternative resources, are there any that have personally helped you, achieve higher levels of expertise?
Yeah. So we'll start with the obvious ones, which are books. So things like the Web App Hacker's Handbook. That's great when I was first starting out. Nowadays, obviously, I have no idea how old that book is. I think maybe it was written in 2007, I want to say. It's changed now. So Portsfigure Web Academy, which is free, is a replacement for the book. So it's pretty much the third generation of the book. And yeah, like I said, that's free. It's got plenty of content and labs. The book is still probably worth reading just to get an understanding of how web apps work in general, because Web Academy is more sort of, oh, here's this vulnerability, here's an explanation. The book does go through in a lot more depth about how HTTP works. I would just caution that several parts of it are outdated, like extremely outdated. So just be aware. But other than that, I think following information security researchers on Twitter, or even just bug bounty or pen testers, reading blogs that they share is key as well. There's so much niche stuff with web apps, so reading through blog posts that do a deep dive into an area that you're not too familiar with is going to be a great help. Other than that, yeah, just basically doing your own research and reading up on topics, I think.
Now, kind of circling back to the the realm of certifications, there's kind of like an online debate going on between which is better for me, offensive security or e-learn security. If someone is kind of put in a situation where they have to choose between one or the other, which do you think one should prioritize? Because e-learn security does have some fantastic courses like EJPT and the Pentester professional courses. Might be a difficult choice for someone coming new into the field.
Yeah, I think OSCP should be the goal. If your goal is pen testing, then you really should get OSCP. It is still the leading cert. Now, people may not like that it's the leading cert, but that doesn't change the fact that it is. In terms of recognition, you're going to have more people from HR or a hiring manager understand what OSCP is than eLearn. That could change. I hope it does. I hope they become sort of equal. Because eLearn definitely has some decent content. I haven't taken any of their courses in depth yet. I do have a subscription to the WAPTX course, but I haven't started it, so I can't really comment. However, I know that there are some of their pen testing courses, like the ones you mentioned, have great reviews from students, and so I think definitely they're worth looking into. But if you're forced to choose one over the other, then I would definitely go with OSCP first. It is definitely a tricky course, but it's doable if you have a vague understanding of pen testing and you want to get into the field a bit more. I would definitely, if you don't have any experience, there are some Udemy courses that you can probably get the basics for cheap. So I would definitely recommend doing those as well.
Yes, and to be fair, a lot of these courses have been revamped relatively recently, and they all kind of cover the same areas, just in different ways. But what do you think, in your opinion, is the most difficult aspect, or the most difficult to digest subject matter of these courses? And how can one improve their skill in that area?
This might sound like an obvious answer, but for OSCP, it's privilege escalation.
Absolutely.
So the original course did a really terrible job, practically no job of explaining it in great detail. I know that the latest update has more information. I haven't bought it, but people who have told me that it's better. It's still lacking though, which is the main reason I created the 2 Udemy courses for PrivS, because if you hung out in the Infosec Prep Discord server for long enough, you would see a number of people complaining that they were getting shells in either the labs or the exam, but missing out on route. And I get messages from students every week saying that they passed because they are able to apply something from my courses in the exam, which is just awesome to hear. But I definitely think it goes to show just how bad they cover privilege escalation in the OSCP itself.
This is true, and everybody has their own pace. Like for me personally, it took almost 8 years of studying for me to pass OSCP. But although I think I could have passed it much earlier, but privilege escalation was certainly a big factor in that. But on the note of maintaining good study habits, are there any that have worked for you that you think would work for others?
Yeah, so what I tend to do, and I tend to recommend, is learn how to create a reference guide of the things you learn, but also maintain it. So I use Sphinx Doc, which has somewhat of a learning curve, but ultimately after trying a bunch of other tools, it's the one I keep going back to. Once you grasp the syntax, which is very much like Markdown, if you've ever used Markdown, you can create HTML docs that have all your notes in them, and you can also search them. And you can also compile it into a PDF on the command line as well, if that's what you want. So what I generally recommend is once you've covered a subject, write it up in your notes, and make sure you keep it updated when you learn more things about it. And the other thing I think I'd recommend is make sure you practice things, and don't just assume you'll be able to recall the skill when you need it. So that's also important for when you're in the exam, because the less time you spend relying on your notes, the better. Like, you can write up how to do a buffer overflow, all the steps. But in the exam, if you're reading from your notes of what to do next, you could take an hour and a half to do what can be done in half an hour. I think the buffer overflow in the OSCP, I would say if you're spending more than an hour on it, you need to speed up your buffer overflow and practice more, because you can definitely do it in half an hour. I think I took 32 minutes. I would say average is probably 45 minutes to an hour. So you can definitely get that time down, and that's time you're saving later on in the exam as well.
And these are very good skills to have just for your career in general as well, because there's so many different sub-doctrines within pen testing. You got external, you have internal, you have cloud, you have web apps. And, between all of these, there's a lot of challenges. So I'm kind of curious, which of those has been the easiest for you, and which of those has been the most challenging?
External testing's the easiest, and only because it's really limited. It's if you're joining a pen test company as a junior, it's probably the thing you're going to get put on all the time. It's definitely, I remember just doing externals for like months at a time, because ultimately it's just, okay, port scan the range, Nessus scan the range, read over the results, and probe anything that looks interesting. So it's kind of, you can follow a script. And you said what was the most challenging?
That's correct.
Yeah, web apps, like for sure, is the most challenging. Purely because the variety and the potential complexity involved, right? So most internal networks use Active Directory, and they'll have a bunch of common services. So even though the networks themselves will be subtly different, you're still attacking AD. You're still attacking a lot of the same services. With web apps, you're going to be mostly testing bespoke applications, which are developed probably by the customer, like a dev team within the customer's company. And they could be using any number of languages and frameworks. I've tested apps with like a single user role. I've tested apps with hundreds of user roles. And then, of course, there's just the vast number of vulnerabilities that could be present. And remember, you're testing the app without access to the source code. So finding them is tricky already, and the amount of customization just makes it insane. But it is, a good challenge to have, I think. And so it's definitely fun. And every week almost, I'm testing something completely new and completely different. So it keeps things fresh.
Yeah, and especially when you're working with clients, time is certainly a factor. So, you don't want to be wasting a whole bunch of time doing a whole bunch of manual tests. I mean, there's certainly that aspect to it, but, as far as tools, you shouldn't be afraid to use them. And on the note of tools, which can you absolutely not live without?
I mean, Burp Suite. any web app pen tester who doesn't answer Burp Suite to that question has no idea what they're doing. Like, okay, I get that OWASP Zap is a thing, but have you tried using OWASP Zap? No. Like, I understand the point of it, right? It's a free tool, but it has nothing on Burp. And I wish that it would. I would love to just, our company not have to pay thousands of dollars for licenses every year for Burp. But right now, until Zap has some of the advanced features of Burp, then there's no point. It's Burp Suite all the way.
I totally agree. And, to kind of put it into an analogy, it's like riding on a skateboard versus driving like a Lamborghini.
Right. Yeah.
But
I've tried using Zap, and it's good. I'm not saying Zap is like bad in any way, but it's just different, and in terms of the feature set, it's just limited. So I think that's the problem.
And then for those that, maybe have completed their OSCP or, they've built up some experience, they have the fundamentals of pen testing down, and they're looking to build up some more expertise within like a given subfield. Which do you think would be, most worthwhile to invest in? Between like the external, internal, cloud, web app, which do you think would be the most lucrative for people in that situation to pursue?
So you gave me this question in advance, and I asked a guy who we both know if I could share his success story, because honestly, it made way more sense. And he said yes. So Homebrewer from the Infosec Prep Discord. He's a student, but he started doing bug bounties, I think maybe 3 months ago. And the way he did it was he dedicated several hours every morning to it before his classes started. And he's had amazing success with it, right? A lot of web app stuff as well. So now he's at the point where he's invited to private programs. I think he's on the Synac Red team. And this is all before graduating. So that's definitely the most lucrative, because if you can get into bug bounties and dedicate the time, especially if you're a student and you don't have, you have some free time at least, I think that's probably the method, the way you should go. I would say you need to be prepared for failure, because you'll go for days without finding things, or you'll find something really cool, submit it, and it's just going to get marked as a duplicate. So if you're interested in doing it, I definitely would start with BugCrowd over HackerOne, because with BugCrowd, if you find a duplicate, you'll still get points for it. And the more points you have, so the more points you have, the more you'll unlock sort of private invites as well. So you can totally go through programs, especially the points only. If you dedicate time to points only, where there are less hackers doing them, because obviously the money aspect isn't there, you'll get private invites to more limited bug bounties, where there's maybe only like 50 hackers are invited. So I definitely think that's probably worthwhile. Just definitely be prepared for failure. Just don't let it affect you. You're gonna find something.
And have you ever personally tried your hand at bug bounties?
Yeah, so Homebrew and I sort of hook up on a few bug bounties occasionally. I've done some on my own as well, but obviously with a full-time pen test job, it's kind of difficult to dedicate time to. Certainly on the scale that Homebrewer does it. But yeah, and that and all my other projects that I have, just the time factor becomes kind of annoying.
Any success stories within that?
Yeah, so I'm kind of proud of the fact that my first accepted bug was a P1 for SQL injection.
Very
so
strong
nice.
flex.
Right? So I was like, yeah, okay, good. But honestly, that wasn't even the best thing. The best thing I found was it was an external server-side request forgery, which was cool enough. But then I was able to convert it into an internal, which I could then use to actually port scan and access some of their internal services. So that was a nice write-up to have.
Yeah, and there may be some subtle differences between pursuing bug bounties, versus doing like the pen testing as like your day job. What advice do you have for those looking to pursue bug bounties, or anything they should be aware of?
I think mostly just don't get disheartened. And also I think there are two types of bug bounty hunter that I've seen, and some people fall into both categories. There's the type who will do subdomain enumeration across all the scope and just look for something that looks weird and just hammer at that. That's kind of not my forte, mostly because coming from a pen test background, I usually get a scope and they're like, okay, attack this and attack it for 5 days and write a report. So that's the kind of deeper dive. So most of my bug bounty hunting has been like I'll just look at the site that is first on the scope and just do a deep dive and see what I can find. So really, there's no one way that's better than the other. Like some of the people who do the subdomain enumeration are making bank. So try your hand at both and just see which one you prefer. Just bear in mind that when you're doing a deeper dive, you probably want to do more of the advanced web app stuff. So I would recommend doing Portswig or Web Academy at least to learn about some of the vulnerabilities.
And most importantly, pay attention to the scope. You absolutely do not want to end up in jail.
Yeah.
So, on the bright side with bug bounties, that's something that you could do from anywhere on planet Earth. But, sometimes people find themselves kind of landlocked to a particular location, and then, there's no opportunities within their immediate location. So then they start looking for jobs elsewhere. And, from my time of getting to know you on Discord, I understand that you currently work in a foreign country. What has your experience been like working in a foreign country versus your home country?
Well, firstly, to clarify, I am American now. so this is my home country. But yeah, no, I get you. So to be honest, I was only working in the UK for maybe like 3 years before I moved, so my experience is kind of limited. However, I did have security clearance over there, and currently I'm not even sure how it works with dual citizenship over here. But being able to do government jobs, they're kind of unique. They're very strange. I have vivid memories of taking an external hard drive because we needed to basically run our operating system off the external hard drive and only take what we needed, and then they would go off and destroy the external hard drive.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, so leaks and stuff they just don't like, clearly. But yeah, I think I definitely prefer working in America. The salaries and benefits are just much better, and I love this country more than my former one. So in terms of clearance, I have no qualms. If the government says, "Oh yeah, you need to give up your UK citizenship," it would be gone like that. I have no real ties back to the UK right now. So there's that at least.
And for those that do find themselves in that situation where there's not a whole lot of opportunities within their immediate area. What advice would you give to those looking to either work internationally or make a big move to take a new job?
Again, I'm not really the best person to ask because I came through a marriage visa, so I have no idea how hard it is, because I understand marriage and fiance visas are like the easy way in, right? So it must be way more difficult for people who are trying to get in via a work visa. Generally, I would advise just read up on the entire process because it is a major headache. It costs a lot of money. If you are interested in doing it, go to, I think it's visajourney.com, which is an awesome website. You can create an account and set up your visa journey, which basically shows you what you need to submit, what evidence, how much it's going to cost, and just track the process. Which it was just epic. So, and there's also forums where you can talk to other people who are in your situation. But I think because of the expense, you just need to make sure you can actually support yourself, because immigrating costs thousands of dollars just in paperwork and the filing fees and absolutely everything. It's crazy.
Yep, and even with a long distance move, you have to consider things like rent, cost of living for the new city or the new area that you're moving to. It's a big decision.
Yeah, exactly.
So to bring this, kind of toward a close, what challenges do you see facing the infosec or pen testing field in the coming years?
Automation, for sure. I think that's affecting, to be honest, the technology industry as a whole. But there are a lot of companies now that can scan application code reliably. So you definitely need to know how to focus on things that can't easily be automated. I think web apps are, for the most part, fine, because there's a user involved. You're the customer's customer. It's slightly more complicated, and there's definitely things that just cannot be automated yet. Like you'd need significant AI development to properly automate them. So things like authorization testing, business logic application flow errors, and environment misconfigurations. Like you can't reliably determine which browser someone's going to be using the web app with. So I think that's there's like a silver lining. Automation is going to definitely change the industry a lot, but there's still some good stuff for regular pen testers.
Absolutely, and there's still some holes that need to be filled as well. As a lot of web apps move to like the containerized model, there's still some challenges that developers are faced there. Just as an example, like the Docker daemon group or having the Docker daemon exposed. Kubernetes. There's all sorts of technologies coming out, and each one of those still have their own challenges.
Yeah. Definitely, especially web apps are just getting more and more complicated, which necessarily means that they're just becoming more exposed to vulnerabilities. The more complicated you make something, the more vulnerable it is.
And so, to really bring this to a close, just wanted to say I really, really appreciate your time today. And, I know that you have a couple of Udemy courses out there. You have a couple of Try Hack Me labs. Are there any secret projects that you're working on now that maybe the listeners would be interested to know?
I'm not sure there are any secret ones, but I'm working on a buffer overflow Try Hack Me room for OSCP students to practice on. So that's coming along. I hit some snags with it, but hopefully it's going to be ready maybe within a week or two. And obviously after that, I'm probably going to be writing my web app hacking course, which I'm going to try and aim at beginners. And I want to try and teach the entire process rather than just teaching about vulnerabilities and how to exploit them. So it's going to include scoping. It's going to include writing reports and how to actually suggest mitigations. Because if you know how to exploit something but you don't know how to fix it, your report's going to be useless. So I think that's going to be a long process, to be honest. And the other thing, obviously, is Auto Recon version 2, technically version 3, but I didn't I didn't call the current version 2. That's looming on the horizon for sure. I'm gonna get round to it eventually. It's just it's a big task because I'm pretty much rewriting it from scratch again. But watch this space.
When is the David Hasselhoff mod coming to Auto Recon?
I don't know. Version 2. Yeah, we'll put it in. It'll be an Easter egg.
All right, then. And where can people find you online or on social media? What are some good links for people to reach out to you?
So I'm often on Twitter at Tib3rius because Tib3rius was taken. And similarly, I have a Twitch account, Tib3rius as well. My YouTube is Tib3rius with a 3, so I got that one. And I think the only other place I really hang out is on Discord. So if you go into the Infosec Prep Discord server, I'm an admin there. I also have my own Discord server, which you're free to join. There's a bunch of my students who discuss things there as well. So I think that's all of it. I can't think of any other social media I have.
All right, then. Well, like I said, I really, really appreciate your time today, Tib3rius, and this has been a joy for me, and I feel like I've gotten to know you better myself. So, with that being said, we'll close this out, and I'm gonna do my outro while we're doing this. So, if you've ever tricked anybody in a video game by telling them to hold Alt and press F4, go ahead, hit those like and subscribe buttons. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. This was an interview with Tib3rius. Do you have anything?
Thank you very much.
any cool outros?
I don't, not off the top of my head. I can't beat that one. That was great. But yeah, I guess thanks for having me on. It was a really good experience, and yeah, I hope people listen and get to know me a bit better.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, man, and we'll catch you all later.